Hello everybody, it is Professor Parish and welcome to week 4. We are technically at midterm if you can believe it. This summer's going by fast and it's going to keep just chugging along until we get to finals week. So as you probably have noticed, if you watched last week's video for week 3, we went over pretty much all of the poetry chapters in that video. There are not a lot of terms in poetry that are staple terms, as I would call them. Most of the terminology in our poetry unit is very much stylistic choices, things you can use in your poems, terms that you can definitely incorporate into your paper number 2, which will be due at the end of this week in week 4. So what I wanted to do for week 4, rather than extend poetry, if you need to go back and watch week 3's video, I definitely would. But this week I want to talk about MLA. And I want to focus on MLA this week because this starts us on really delving into the Modern Language Association and the use of citations from here on out. So as I scroll down here, if you've not watched lecture 3, week 3's lecture video on poetry, I would definitely do so. But otherwise, apologies for this being a day late, but I am going to dive into MLA very shortly after I review what's due this week. There are not as many assignments due this week, which you're probably going, yay, thank you. So week 4, the main things that are due is, first of all, the discussion forum, our poetry exam, which is set up exactly like the fiction exam. You can save it as you go. You can save your progress. It is not timed. It's open book. Should be a pretty easy exam. And then your Dropbox for paper 2. Please make sure that you turn in paper 2. You will get a chance to revise this paper just like we have with our fiction paper, but you have to turn in a draft by Sunday in order for it to be able to be revised. All right, so just make sure, do not wait until the last minute, especially with inclement weather, things like that, technology issues. Don't wait till 11:50 on Sunday night to try to turn your paper and something go wrong, okay? Just little housekeeping notes there. So let's dive into MLA. What I'm going to do is go to our syllabus, handouts, and videos page, and I graded our MLA citation and in-text citation review today, and I've left you all feedback on that assignment, and for the most part everyone did okay. The MLA presentation, which is this document right here, has been on our site since week 1, but you probably have not downloaded it because we don't have a video to go along with it. If you did download it though, kudos to you all. So I went ahead and downloaded it, and that's what we're going to talk about in this week's video. So before we get started, I'm going to get my giant mug of decaf because it's late at night and I don't want to be up all night. And we are going to dive right into this sucker. All right, so when I created this presentation, the main idea behind it was that it was essentially going to be a paper 4 centered presentation, meaning that by the time we get to our last paper in this class, I expect you to go back and review this presentation, because the first part I'm going to gloss over a little bit because it's really not going to come into play until we talk about paper 4. And then I'm going to come back to this presentation, okay? So if it seems like the first couple of slides I'm kind of breezing through, that's because we're going to come back and touch base on the first part of this presentation a few weeks down the road, okay? But you're welcome to go back and read it in more detail if you so choose. So the idea behind the first part of this presentation is picking credible sources to use for your papers. And for papers 2 and 3 on poetry and drama, we have a very credible source, and it is our textbook. So what I'm asking you to do for paper number 2 and paper number 3 is to use our Discovering Literature book as a source, meaning that you need to cite that textbook in MLA format. And the reason why I have you do that is because you are going to be talking about the terminology that associates with drama and associates with poetry. So you do need to be citing your sources there. So that is a very credible source. It's a textbook for a college course. I would consider that pretty good justification as to why it's credible. But we'll go back and talk about these types of sources that you see on your screen once we get to paper 4. And we're going to talk about being able to use bias with sources. We'll touch back on that. How you can use a biased source if you absolutely need to. We'll touch back on that. And then obviously site credibility. Now, I will go ahead and tell you all this. I am sure maybe your high school has done this. If they didn't, I'll be surprised. But they've probably told you you don't need to use Wikipedia as a source. They are correct. And I'm sure that in your head you're thinking, I've been told this since I was 5. I know not to use Wikipedia, but every semester I have someone use it. So I feel the need to explain myself every semester because it seems to happen. The reason why we don't use Wikipedia, WikiHows, Ask.com, About.com, any of those wikis or ask sites, the reason why we don't use them is, one, anyone can create an account and edit these sites. It used to be you could just edit them. You didn't even need an account. But anymore, most websites have an account function, and so you have to create one. But again, anybody can create an account. 2, it can take, anyone can add information about topics on these sites. And 3, it may take days, weeks, or months for moderators or admins to get in, see the false evidence, and correct their mistakes. And the reason why I know this is true is, and I tell this story every semester, is that a boy, I say boy, he's a man now, a young man that I went to college with named Jairus Bellamy, is actually, we had an English class together and we were told about the dangers of using Wikipedia. And so he decided that he would test this theory to see if it actually had trajectory, if it actually would impact citations. So he went to wikipedia.com, and this was back before you had to create an account, and he went to Frank Sinatra's page. And Frank Sinatra, who is a famous singer, he went to his Wikipedia page, clicked the edit function, went down to when he passed away, and inserted this very brief piece of information. He said that Jairus Bellamy, who is my friend from college, was the spiritual advisor for Frank Sinatra, and that he gave the eulogy at Frank Sinatra's funeral. Which seems ridiculous because it was. And he saved it. Now, Wikipedia did eventually catch on to this false piece of information about 3 to 4 weeks down the road, and they took that information out and corrected the entry. So if you go on Wikipedia now, you won't see Jairus's name. However, because other websites didn't follow this criteria, a lot of websites and a lot of YouTube argument videos have cited Jairus Bellamy as being Frank Sinatra's spiritual advisor and the giver of his eulogy. You can go look it up online. Just type in Jairus Bellamy, Frank Sinatra's spiritual advisor, and it will show up. I am not joking. It's real. Except it's not real because the information is completely hokum and totally false. But that's the point. The point is that some guy who's a college student back in the early 2000s thought it'd be cool to spread around this fake baloney, and now people are citing him like he's real. That's the trajectory and the power that citations can have. And that is why we are not using Wikipedia as a source. So if you are a die-hard wiki junkie and you like getting on Wikipedia or wiki sites to have as a starting point, that's fine. But when you go to cite that information, just go to the bottom of the screen and see the sources that Wikipedia uses in the article and cite those initial sources instead. That way you're covered. You're citing stuff that feeds into the Wikipedia page. It's all good. Okay. Like I said, I'll touch base back on this when we get to paper 4, but I always have to tell my classes that don't use Wikipedia or any WikiHows. In the words of Liam Neeson, I will find you and I will fail you. I'm kidding. But I will count off. All right, so we'll talk about the credibility of the URLs and what all of these mean too when we get to paper 4. They're not totally necessary to go over right now, but you can, again, get on this presentation and kind of read for yourself the hierarchy of credibility in terms of websites. And how you determine credibility, go over that. And then fact versus testimonial. When we get to paper 4, we'll talk about that. And basically, Kairos is important. I do want to touch base on that. Kairos is Greek for timeliness. And for the most part, most scholars will recommend that you only use sources that are 5 years or younger, so they're not over 5 years old. especially in the digital era that we live in, a lot of times information can get highly dated very quickly. The only exception to that, I suppose, is if you are going to use a source as background information or as the original information about a topic and it's older than 5 years, that's okay. But if you're going to do like some modern, up-to-date sources, they need to be no older than 5 years. So that would mean they need to have been written in 2014 or sooner. All right. Okay. So MLA, the Modern Language Association. Basically, the idea behind the Modern Language Association is that when people started to do research and create scholarly articles, they wanted to create a way that we could give credit to the authors that we're talking about. So basically the idea is the phrase, give credit where credit's due. Because to be honest, and I don't know if any of you have ever published before or tried publishing, it is a arduous, long process. I've had a article in a textbook published once, and it took 2 years. 2 years, and it took maybe my friends and I a couple months for each of us to write our articles, and then 2 years on top of that just to get it published. So it's a big process. It's time consuming, it's hard, it can be costly. So it's pretty obvious why someone would want to be credited when you use their words as your own, right? So that's the idea behind MLA, is that we're just giving credit to the people that we talk about, to the ideas that we talk about that are someone else's. Essentially, you incorporate MLA into your papers in 2 ways. The first way is the one that we always think of, and that is the works cited page. That little page at the end that has all of our sources in a big list. That's usually what people think of. But also, we have what are called in-text citations. And that's kind of like when you reference something in your paper, you need to show which source you're referencing. Because if I just go to your works cited page and I see 20 sources, I'm like, well, that's cool, but where do you cite all these 20 sources at? Which source goes to what idea? So your in-text citation is a way to do that. That lets you see in the paper exactly which source you're citing, so that later, when you get to the works cited page, you can look up that source and find more information. So 2 parts, in-text citations, works cited page. Now, in-text citations, people think these are hard, and they're actually not. They're really simple. You just have to know the hierarchy of how to do in-text citations. And I'm about to show you. So, in-text citations are these little bits of information in parentheses at the end of the sentence. So, for example, I say, Professor Billingsley stated the importance of, quote, completing all the tasks of the project on time, end quote. You'll notice here how you format an in-text citation. So once you're done with your quotation here, you put your quotation marks, then the in-text citation, then the punctuation. So it goes quotation mark, in-text, punctuation. You want that in-text citation to be within the sentence that it goes with. All right, and that's why the punctuation's at the very end. Now you'll notice I just have the web URL here. That's all I need. That's it. And you may be asking yourself, well, how do I know what to put in these parentheses? How do I know what goes here? That is what we're about to go over next. So there are 2 types of in-text citations. Print documents, which is anything tangible, like our book, and web documents, which are online or digital. So this is really simple. Print documents. You have very few options. So if your source is a print source, meaning it's tangible, it's a book or something you can hold, the first thing you should do, the number 1 choice you should do is last name of author and page number. And you mainly do last name of author and page number if the author isn't mentioned in the sentence. So if I say, the article noted, pandas are the cutest animals, I would put the author's last name, Billingsley, and the page number. That's it. That's all I need. Now you ask, what if I mention Billingsley in the sentence? Do I still need an in-text citation? Well, yeah, you do, because your audience doesn't know who Billingsley is. So I would say, Billingsley pointed out, pandas are the cutest animals. Since I already have Billingsley over here, what I will do instead is you can either do one of 2 things. You can put the title of the book, which is Cute 101, and the page number, which is 14, or I can just put the page number. You can just put 14 and it's totally fine. But a lot of people want to do the title with the page number so that when you get to the works cited page, you'll know exactly what source that you were talking about there. So these are your options. Author last name, page number, title of book, page number. That's it for print sources. Nothing else. Those are your options. Pretty simple, right? That's it. Web sources are even easier than print sources. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say most of the sources that you cite in your papers from here on in, aside from your textbook, are going to be web sources. So you have two options for a web source. You either just do the author's last name, and the reason why we don't do page numbers, as you'll notice, online sources do not have page numbers. Websites don't have page numbers. It's all kind of a flat linear surface. So I have my quotation here. The article noted, "There's no way to beat a Rubik's Cube in under 4 seconds" by Billingsley. That's all I need. That's the only in-text citation I need. No page number, just the last name. Now, much like our print sources, if I do say the author's last name here, Billingsley stated, "The Rubik's Cube is hard to beat." I don't want to put Billingsley here again because it looks weird, and I don't have any page numbers. So, since this is a website or a digital source, I'm going to put the title of the website, which is nytimes.com. That's my source. That's where my website is located. That's all you need. So, print sources, author's last name, page number, or title of book, page number. Web sources, last name of author, or website. That's it. In-text citations are easy peasy as long as you just follow that hierarchy. It's either going to be the author's last name up here, or it's going to be the title or the web URL. Those are my options. Okay? So in-text citations aren't bad. A good rule of thumb is to make sure that you put maybe at least an in-text citation at the end of each paragraph where you cite research. All right. Now, if you're citing multiple sources within the same paragraph, yeah, you need to do that citation after you're done with each source. But if you're just citing a whole paragraph and you're just using the New York Times in it, you can just put this at the very end of the paragraph and I'll get what you're doing. All right. So that's in-text citations. Pretty simple, no? All right. The other thing is our works cited page. So this is the very last page of your essay. It needs to be on its own separate page. At the top of that page, you'll center the words works cited. If you say reference page, I'm okay with that. Or citations, that's fine. Just something in the center that lets your audience know that that's what it is. Now, typically, all of your sources are in alphabetical order, starting with the very first letter of that citation. Okay? So you're supposed to put them in alphabetical order. This first paper I'll be generous with and probably won't have to even look because you're probably only going to use one source, which is your textbook. But by the time we get to our last paper in the class, you're going to need your sources in alphabetical order. Okay. You will probably notice in the discussion forum that I've been counting off some points for grammar and formatting. This is why. So if you're curious why I've been counting certain points off, I am just doing this because it's a nice practice to know how to format your titles of either books or chapters. So do I use italics or do I use quotation marks? Here is the best way that I can recommend. If you have a large text, like an entire book or a whole TV show or an entire music album or a whole web journal, if it's a large text or the entirety of something, put it in italics. Okay? But if it's a part of something, if it's just a chapter or an episode of a TV show or just a single poem or a single journal article or a single song, if it's just a small text or a piece, then do exactly what I'm doing now and put it in quotation marks. That is the big difference. So if you've been wondering why I've been counting off on the discussion forum, that's why. And you can look on here, save it, write it down, screenshot it, whatever, and that way you will know for the future. And I try to, in the discussion forums, correct through my responses as well, or at least show you what the right format is. But yeah. Okay. So, this is probably where you've been very confused. Because as I realized, the citation presentation that I've uploaded is an older version. So, we're going to correct that right now. All right. So, MLA has changed in the last few years. And it will keep changing for a number of reasons. One reason is that as we create new things to cite, MLA has to find new ways to cite them. So the nice thing about MLA is pretty much any type of media you can cite in your paper, which is really cool, especially when you get into bigger classes with bigger papers, you have more options for sources. Whereas other citation formats like APA or Chicago Manual of Style, they're a little bit more limited on the types of media you can cite. The problem is that each time we add new things, we make our ways of citing more and more complex. Used to be this was it, you just cited a book. Now you can cite tweets, which is adorable. You can cite YouTube videos, you can cite emails, interviews, lecture notes, you can cite anything. So if you've been putting the medium at the end and been like, Ms. Parish, I've done exactly what the presentation has told me, I apologize, because this is no longer a thing. Now MLA wants you to not put the medium at the very end. My guess is that if you're citing a book, you should know it's a print source, so why put print? Seems a little redundant. That's the only thing I can think of. Or my conspiracy theory is they just want us to keep buying new editions and spending more money. But that is my cynical capitalist view of it, so we're just going to leave that there. So basically, you have the author's last name, first name, title of the work, the publisher, and the date. And that's basically the basics of it. Yeah, I'm going to save this. Boom. Okay. So for books, and like I said, I apologize, I'm going to delete this. This is an old version. Boom. You have the author, last name, first name, book title, city, publisher, and year. So we have Smith, comma, John, and you always do last name, comma, and then first name. A day to remember in italics. City, Penguin Press is my publisher, and my year. That's it. That is a book. Pretty straightforward, right? If you're doing website, again, I'm going to apologize to all of you. I'm just going to go back and give you all credit for these. Because this should have been the newer version. So, ideally, the formula doesn't change too much with citations. There's just little tweaks that happen. Okay. So with a web page or an article on a website, you have author last name, comma, first name. The title of the web page is in quotation marks because it's a part of the site. The web URL is in italics, then the publisher, the date, the medium, and the web link. So we have Murphy, comma, Tanya, immigration reform on the forefront, NY Times, the New York Times Online. There's no date, so if you don't have a publication date, you put n.d. web, and then the link to the site. Now, this part right here is probably the most complicated part of the whole thing, because MLA wants us to recognize two things. MLA wants us to recognize the website, which is nytimes.com, but it also wants us to recognize the publisher of nytimes.com, which is the New York Times Online. When MLA first started this, citing web pages, the idea makes total sense. They're like, okay, we want you to recognize the web URL, which is where the file is, but we also want you to recognize who publishes that site. On paper, that sounds great. Here's the problem, and this is what confuses most students. branding is a thing. And I know some of you in the class have said you're majoring in marketing or communications. Branding is a thing. And I can't name too many websites or too many brands offhand that have a different web title than their publisher. So of course, the New York Times Online has a website called NY Times. You're going to find when you cite a web article that most of your websites and web publishers are going to look very similar. YouTube.com is published by YouTube. So you have to write them out twice, and it's frustrating for students because I feel like you feel you're repeating yourself. It's not that, it's just that web publishers have a brand in mind and they don't want to stray away from it. So it is totally okay if your web URLs and your publishers look very similar. As long as you're italicizing the first one right after the title and leaving this unitalicized, you're going to be fine. Okay? So that's a web page. Okay. As far as dates go, make sure that you put your dates kind of in like military format. So 24 September or Sept 2014 or 14 May 2014. If it's a month with more than 4 letters, then just feel free to abbreviate it. Now, this part right down here is referring back to this section, the web URL. So I put NY Times here. That's all you need. You don't need the whole www.com part. You don't need that. You put that at the very end. You put that down here at the link, but not right there. Okay. Journal articles are probably the hardest thing to cite in MLA. And the reason for that is that they have multiple parts. So a journal article does author last name and first name, just like we normally do. Has the title of the article in quotation marks, like we normally do. Then it has the journal title in italics, the volume, the issue, the year published, pages, and medium. Or pages and web link. And that's it. So we have Doe, Jane, Pavlov's Theory, American Psychological Journal in italics, volume 14, issue 5, 2014, pages 34 to 56, and I'm just going to put where I found this at, EBSCOhost.com. And that's pretty much it. So the nice thing about journals is usually when you find the journal article, if you use one, it's going to have all this information available. You just have to put it in the right order. Okay? Now, the last page on here, I linked to Purdue OWL. You can honestly use in our Cengage handbook. I would go off this PowerPoint now that I've corrected it. Go off this PowerPoint first as your base, but you'll notice in your Cengage handbook there's that little insert that has different examples of ways you can do citations. Use that as a reference. You can also use Purdue OWL as a reference. My thing about Purdue OWL is that, and if you've ever used Purdue OWL, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when I bring it up. Purdue OWL is complex. It is a complicated website, as you're about to see. If you don't know what Purdue OWL is, Purdue University in Indiana has a fantastic English department, and they have an entire branch dedicated to maintaining this site, so, which is pretty cool. I am not crazy about the layout. I get why they do it this way because there's so much information, but when you first get on here, you may be overwhelmed, and I understand. You'll notice that there's 3 different citation formats that they have on here. They have MLA, they have APA, and they have the Chicago Manual of Style. Now, on here, if you scroll down the home page, they give you a very basic entry and show you how to cite things. They show you how to cite the titles. They show you how, like here's an example of a journal article, pretty simple. They show you, basically they give you examples. which is fine. They show you how to cite a TV show. So like 94 Meetings, Parks and Recreation, Season 2, Episode 21. NBC's the publisher. Here's where it's published. It's on Netflix. Here's the link. Awesome. They'll give you a lot of examples if you just scroll through here. If you just scroll through, they'll give you several examples. Use that as a supplement. Go with the PowerPoint first, then your Cengage textbook, and then also use this if you need to. But this is just a guide here to help you if you find a certain type of source that you want to use and you're not sure how to cite it. You can go down here to these 3 links here. If it says Works Cited page, it'll show you the basic format, how to cite books, how to cite magazines and periodicals, how to do electronic sources, and other common sources. I want to show you the tweet because it's adorable. But if I go to electronic sources here, scroll on down, an ebook you can cite, an image, an article, an email or email interview, a blog posting or discussion group. Look at this. You can cite a tweet. I think this is adorable. You have to put the handle on there, so like @TomBrokaw. Then you put the entire tweet in your citation. And then Twitter, the date, the time it was published, and the link to it. Adorable. I've only had a few students cite tweets before, and I really think they did it just because they thought it was cute. And they're like, look, you can cite a tweet. But a YouTube video, you may actually cite a YouTube video, and you can see how it's done here. It's just the title of the video, YouTube, uploaded by whatever the person's name is, and you're going to have some weird YouTube handles, the date, and the link to it. That's it. It's pretty straightforward. A lot of the updates MLA has done in the last year or two has been just to streamline all of our sources, which I think is helpful. But if you're like me and you're used to doing it a certain way for years, it can be frustrating because now you got to reteach yourself how to do MLA again. Until the next update. But that's pretty much MLA. Like I said, I will update this on our website so that you have the most up-to-date version. You can go back to this presentation. You can explore Purdue OWL. You can look at your Cengage handbook. And as always, ask me questions if you are ever concerned about anything involving citations. If something doesn't make sense or you're confused, just feel free to ask me as long as you've looked at these materials first. Chances are your answer is going to be in those materials. But if for some reason you can't find it, just let me know. All right? But that is all that I really wanted to talk about with this presentation. I'm really excited based on your thesis statements to read what your paper number 2s will be about. There's a lot of creative writing, there's a lot of analyses, there's a lot of comparing and contrasting going to be going on, and I am excited. So as always, feel free to contact me, ask me questions, stop by my office, call me, whatever you need to do to get me to answer your questions. But I will be here to help you in the best way that I can. All right? Until next time, when we start talking about drama, have a great week, and I'll talk to you all again soon.